So, August 2022, question 2B. Let's check it out. Now, Rona Hotel Limited is currently evaluating a proposal to take over Duet Restaurant Limited. The board of directors of Rona is in the process of making a proposal for acquisition of Duet Restaurant, but first needs to place a value on the company. Rona has gathered the following financial data. So Rona Hotel Limited, weighted average cost of capital 12%, price earnings ratio 12 times. Hiyo ni ya Rona, shareholders required rate of return is 15%. Then Duet Restaurant Limited, current dividend payment per share. So dividend per share 2.7, past 5 years dividend payment to from 2017 to 2021. The current earnings per share is 3.7. The number of issued ordinary shares are 5 million. So 5 million shares. It is estimated that the shareholders of Duet Restaurant require a rate of return of 10% higher than that of Rona Limited. So Duet wanataka 10% higher than that of Rona Limited. We have rate of return on Rona Limited pale juu. I think 12%. So I'll do it 10% higher than that, no problem. Owing to the higher level of risk associated with Duet Restaurant Limited's operations. Rona Restaurant Limited estimates that the free cash flows from Duet Restaurant Limited at the end of the first year will be 2.5 million, and this will grow at an annual rate of 5% for the first 4 years, after which the growth rate will revert to the historical earnings stroke dividend growth rate in perpetuity. I believe historical growth rate, you can get it in note number 2. Yeah, do it. Rona expects to raise 5 million at the end of year 2 by selling off hotels of Duet Limited that are surplus of its needs. Estimate values of Duet Restaurant using the following valuation approaches: price earnings ratio model, then dividend growth model, and the discounted free cash flow basis. So if you start with the price earnings, the PE ratio. So under the PE ratio model, we know that the value of Duet, we get it from the market price. PE ratio is the market price per share over the earnings per share, clear. Or we can get the value by taking the PE ratio. PE ratio times what? When you say the profit after tax, or the total earnings, right? The total earnings. And the profit after tax, I know it can be the earnings per share times the market times the number of ordinary shares. That will give me the facts. How do we get the EPS? Profit after tax divided by what? The number of shares. Remember, they don't want us to get the price, the value of one share. They want us to get the value of the firm. The value of the firm is based on all the shares. The value of Duet will be the total value. See price ya share moja. And that's why we don't need the earnings per share. We need the profit after tax. So to get our part, to multiply the EPS with the number of shares. Can we get the PE ratio of Duet? Can we get the PE ratio of Duet? Or do we have it? Let's see. The price earnings ratio. Been told anything about that? So Rona Hotel Limited price earnings ratio. Rona Hotel is 12 times pale juu. and we don't have the current market price per share of Duet, the only thing we can do here is to assume that the PE ratio of Duet and Rona will be the same. Because otherwise, tunataka the MPS, because we know to get the PE ratio, we need the MPS divided by what? The EPS. EPS of Duet tuko nayo, lakini hatuna MPS. So we don't have the PE ratio of Duet, but we have to answer the question nevertheless. So here, we'll appreciate for the PE ratio. Tutatumia hiyo ya Rona, ambayo ni ngapi? 12 times. And can we have the profit after tax? Earnings per share times what? The number of shares. We have the earnings per share?
Yes.
Of how much? Now kona shares ngapi? 5 million. Which would be how much? Three 3.7 times 5? 18.7. 18.5. Na hiyo ni million. So therefore, value of Duet is going to be the PE of 12 times 18.5. Which will be how much? Sorry? 3.2. Umepata hiyo? Ile unasema ni time tu nilikosa. Time tu nilikosa. Ningepata alafu najiambia haikai ngumu. Yache kuandika na kujua sana. Now dividend growth model now. Under the dividend growth model, how do we get the PO? PO into 1 plus G over KE minus G. We have the DO of how much? 2.7. The current dividend payments ndio. We have our KE. Wamesema itakuwa ngapi? 10 plus 10 plus 12. They require a rate of return of 10% higher than that of Rona Limited. Ya Rona Limited ni 12%. So 10% higher than 12%. So 10 plus 12, which would be ngapi? So 22%. What about G? G equals to? The nth root, what is our n? 5 minus 1, ndio. Which is 4. The most current dividend of how much?
7.
So kutumia 2.7, then your n should be 5. So the most current is 2.3. Ya kitambo kabisa ni ngapi? 1.5 minus 1. What is our G? Ukitumia 2.7 ni kama umeongeza mwaka mmoja kwa 2022. Wale wa calculators, please confirm kama calculator zako zinafanya kazi. G of how much? This is a chance to confirm how to book up your N 0.0. 0 point. Nasikia vile answers ni tofauti tofauti. 112. 112. So 0.112. So therefore, our PO becomes, and remember that PO will be the price of one share. We shall multiply by the number of shares. So we are having 2.7 into 1 plus 0.112 divided by the KE 0.22 minus 0.112, and everything we multiply by how many shares? 5 million shares. So it becomes how much? 139 million. Na hiyo nyingine umemaliza? Ama wakula malizia? Wakula malizia kazi yako. Now the discounted free cash flow basis. Now for the discounted free cash flow basis, I can see it in note number 2, where we are told that Rona Restaurant Limited estimates that the free cash flows from Duet Restaurant Limited at the end of the first year will be 2.5 million, and these will grow at an annual rate of 5% for the first 4 years. After which, the growth rate will revert to the historical earnings growth rate in perpetuity. Historical earnings growth rate ni ngapi? Ni 11.2. Yet tumepata kwa note number 2. So miaka 4 za kwanza itagrow na 5%, ndio. Alafu baada ya 5% is stabilized at 0.112. So we have the year, we have the cash flows, we'll have the PVIF so that we can have the present value. The cost of capital tulipata ni 22%. So tuko na the first 4 years, year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. End of year 1, our cash flows will be how much? Is it 2.5? 2.5 million will grow at an annual rate of 5% for the first 4 years. For the first 4 years. So tuko na in year 2, we are having 2.5 growing at 5%. How much will that be? Remember the supernormal growth form? It grows at different rates. The first 4 years ina grow na 5%, alafu baada ya hapo ita stabilize at the historical growth rate ambayo tumeipata kwa required number 2 to infinity. 2.625. We have 2.625. Still growing at 5%. Okay, raise for 2 bus we maintain 2.5. Because I can do 2.5 times 1.05 raised to power 2. It's the same as taking this and increasing at 5%. 2.756. So I have 2.756. Increase it by 5%. 2.894. Walisema ni for the next 4 years. So tuko na nyingine 2.894 at 5%. The first 2.5 was end of year 1, and now we grown 4%, 5% for 4 years, 3.039. Then we have another year 5 after stability, where we now need the PO, which is the DO 1 plus G over KE minus what? Remember the present value immediately after stability? So the 3.039 now is growing at the rate of what? So can I say 1.112? Divide by cost of equity 0.22 minus 0.112. What do we have there? At 1.29. Can we discount? Table 1 or table 2? Table? Hii ni ile matime yenye hufai kukosa kujibu hata wewe. You're not supposed to keep quiet. There is power in speaking. 22% 1 year. 0 points. 1 divided by 0 points. 8196. Year 2. Iba na shanga zinatoka wapi? 0.9. 8197. Rounded off. 97. The second one, divide by 1.22. 0.717. But that you can 19. You can use the calc. Another model ya calculator ni the same.
How do we use the calc?
Huh?
What do we
By applying the formula. Hii formula iko hapa chini. By the way, on a serious note, calculator takes you very fast because naona leo karibu nyote mko na calc exam imepita. Leo sijaona mtu anatumia simu. So the first one, 1 divided by, see the formula in that thing says 1 over 1 plus r raised to n. But 1 plus r raised to negative n still. So if I use that calc, just take your calc and do 1 divided by 1.22. Tuende pamoja. 1 divided by 1.22. You get 0.8197. Bila ku delete anything, finya to divide by 1.22. That is for year 2. Finya equals. Hiyo ni year 3, which is 0.55. 5507 equals singlet. Four five one four. Another equals 3699. Huh? 3699 ama 37. 37. Rounded off. Where you that gives us the value of duet. hiyo achana nayo. Hiyo utapatia, unaweza pata hata example. Can we go to question 5A of April 2022? Kulikuwa na nyingine? So you can check April one, right? There's another one. Question 5A of April 2022. Songo Limited hiyo multiplication na addition hiyo si lazima sasa hivi. Sasa hivi kazi kubwa ni kujua kupata cha kuficha cha kufinya. Jinsi ya kufinya kwa calc is no problem right now. It's getting what to punch in the calc. Now Songo Limited, where Question 5 of April 2022. Follow page numbers, no number page 16. That's about Songo. We are there. Now Songo Limited has decided to acquire Trigger Limited. April 2022. Question 5A. Sasa mambo ni mengi, lazima tupelekane polepole. Right now when you go to sleep, you think about FM, usingizi inapotea. Ukifikiria FM ndio usingizi inaongezeka. Na LM. There's a class I asked, what is a LM in full? Walishindwa kunijibu. What is a LM in full? Ile mmepata timetable, sio? Wacha niache madharau. Songo Limited has decided to acquire Trigger Limited. So who is the predator? Songo is the predator. The financial data for the two companies are given as follows. We have net sales in millions of shillings for Songo and Trigger, profit after tax, number of issued shares, earnings per share. By the way, if I have the profit after tax and the number of shares, do I really need to be given the earnings per share? Hata usiponipea naweza pata, ndio? Because when I do 28.13 divided by 7.5, I expect my answer to be 3.75. Then 3.75 divided by 1.5, I expect to get 2.5. On your calculator, you've confirmed. Dividends per share is 1.3. Total market capitalization 420 for Songo and 42 million for Trigger. For 2 marks, pre-acquisition market price per share of the combined firm. Pre-acquisition market price per share of the combined firm. And that is giving us the 2 marks. Remember the market price, the market value. The total market capitalization gives us the total market value. I can get the market price per share of Songo, and I can get the market price per share of Trigger. When I combine them, then that one gives me the combined MPS. That's how. So, number 1, can just talk about combined MPS. Combined MPS. First of all, we know that the market price per share is the total market value over the number of shares. From the concept of market capitalization, right? The MPS. So here we can say equals to combined market capitalization combined market capitalization divided by combined number of shares. Combined market capitalization divided by the combined number of shares. We're just putting them together. After the merger, zina combined sasa. We have the market capitalization of Songo. 400 and what? 420 million. Ya Twiga ni ngapi? 45 million. How many shares of Songo? 7.5 million. How many shares of Twiga? 1.5 million. So ya juu ni shillings, ya chini ni shares. So how much is the price per share? It's 1.67. So that gives us the 2 marks. So I can go to part 2. Part 2 are being asked about the post-acquisition earnings per share if Twiga Limited shareholders are offered a share of 30 shillings, are offered a share of 30 shillings on a share-for-share exchange. So after the acquisition, first thing that must come into our mind is we need to know the maximum exchange ratio. What is the ratio of exchange between the two companies? Pre-acquisition, there is no exchange that has taken place. Post-acquisition, after the acquisition, we must incorporate the exchange ratio. Like in answering part 2, first of all, we need to get the maximum exchange ratio. Maximum exchange ratio. You remember the formula? What we got a formula before we put it? Equals to offer price. Offer price of who? Maybe the apples is zako. Check tu. At least tumeona, si ndio? Sometimes checking is confirming that you have the notes. Divided by the NPS of the same person, right? So NPS of predator. NPS of the predator. We have the offer price. They are offering a share of how much? With 30 shillings. 30 shillings here. And we have the NPS. The market price per share of the predator. $420 divided by what? Divided by 7.5. So each share has a market price of how much? 56. 56 flat. So therefore, maximum exchange ratio the offer price of 30 shillings divided by the market price of 56, that is 0. Okay. 0.536. 537. What does that mean from interpretation purposes? for every share of Trigger Limited, Songo is offering how many new shares? 0.536 new shares for every one existing share of the target farm. And why are we doing all this? Because I know the post merger earnings per share, the combined EPS equals to combined earnings. Earnings is on a profit after tax divided by combined number of what? Number of shares. Normally, earnings per share, see the earnings over the number of shares. The profit after tax over the number of shares. So we talk about the combined earnings, the combined profit after tax. Do we have the combined earnings? Combined earnings need to add to. We have earnings of Songo. Earnings of Songo ni ngapi? Is it 28.13? Na za Twiga ni ngapi? 3.75. Giving us how much? 31.88. At 1.88, right? Then I need combined number of shares. Combined number of shares. Now, let me try to go in the form of analytical. If it won't make sense, unasema niende pole. First of all, zile shares za Songo zitabaki intact. So you are bringing in the new shares. Shares, Songa kona shares ngapi? I think 7.5 million. Existing shares of Songo will remain to be there still. But you are now bringing in some new shares. The additional shares shall be, we are having 0.536 shares for everyone. Right? 0.536 new shares for every one existing share. Out of how many that this company has? Out of 1.5. Hivi ndio vile nasema. Hapo kwa combined number of shares. The predator is the one called Songo. Shares zake hazitakuzwa. Shares zake ni ngapi? 7.5 million. Sindio? Lakini we are giving out some new shares when we are acquiring this Twiga farm. So the new shares, additional shares. The additional shares. We are asking ourselves if for every one existing share, we are giving you 0.536 new shares. How many new shares are you going to get out of the 1.5 million existing? So that's how we interpreted our exchange ratio. 0.536 new shares for every one existing share of the target farm, right? Yeah, so haka ndo kihesabu tunafanya. Ndo sababu tunasema, okay, hata tufanya we cross multiply. So it will be 0.536 times 1.5 divided by what? Divide by 1. Ndio. So going in a more analytical, unasema kuwa I'm giving out 0.536 new shares for everyone out of the 1.5 million existing shares. So how many new shares are coming in? 0.804. So it will be the combined number of shares. Okay, add that one. 8.304. So can we have combined DPS? Hiyo wakati tunaendelea kusoma na watu wameenda prayers. Tuingiangi kwa urahisi. So combined earnings per share. Combined earnings of how much? That 1.88 divided by the combined number of shares 3.8.304. Nasema ni ngapi? 3.2839. So 3.839. The too much work for commerce. Now, if the price earnings ratio of Songo Limited drops to 12 times after the acquisition, determine the firm's post-acquisition market price per share. So number 3, the combined MPS. Sometimes you try to reason out with the examiner, no ujiulize mbona amenipea some information. In that case, ametuambia kutakuwa na PE ratio ya 12. Sindio? So therefore, to get the combined MPS, we take what? The combined PE ratio times what? Times the combined what? Earnings per share. The combined PE ratio amesema ni 12. EPS nimekuta ilikuwa ngapi? 3.831. 839. I'm very sure ulifanya hivyo ukapata answer ya ngapi? How much? Na vile neighbor anaandika sasa. How much? 26. 46.068. Then finally, number 4, formulate a suitable criteria that should guide Songo in determining whether to acquire Twiga Limited or not. What's up on the bigger story? You can say this. We can say this. Songo Limited should only acquire Twiga Limited if the acquisition will increase its profits, if the acquisition will increase its profits and the market value. If the acquisition will increase its profits and the market value. Next point. It should therefore compare its earnings per share before acquisition. It should therefore compare its earnings per share before acquisition into brackets shillings 3.75 still. With the earnings per share after acquisition. With the earnings per share after acquisition of shillings 3.839. After acquisitions, the earnings per share were 3.839. So before the merger, EPS ya Predator is 3.75. To keep bring in this other company, the earnings per share is 3.839. So at that point only, we can encourage them to do the acquisition. Yeah. The next you say, it should also compare its NPS before acquisition. Its NPS before acquisition. The NPS before acquisition tulikuwa tumecalculate tukapata ngapi? Is it 56? So into bracket shillings 56. The Predator, NPS of the Predator was 56. With the combined NPS. With the combined NPS of shillings 46.068. So hata hajatuambia to advise. Hajatuambia to evaluate what should they look at. What should they look at? So they were just told to formulate a suitable criteria that should guide Songo on determining whether to acquire Trigger or not. So we shall compare the two. Based on the market price per share, we are being discouraged. Yeah. But kumbuka, EPS, how they arrived at the PE ratio, we don't know. Ile PE ratio ambayo walitumia ya 12, it is subjective. It is subjective. So no advice was needed from us, just guiding them on what they should look at. So unapiga hiyo story unapata the formats. Can we do one more? Or two more? Two. Neighbor amesema two. So let's go to December 2021. You can see question 2B. December 2021, question 2B. I don't know if you're seeing the trend. Kila sitting tuko nayo. Sindio? So sijui itakuwa question gani ya December 2023. Hazimekatalia kwa question 2. So probably we're preparing for our question 2B. Kubwa Limited, we're there. So we are told that Kubwa Limited is considering acquiring Dogo Limited. So Kubwa is the predator, Dogo is the target. The selected financial data for the two companies is as follows. So you have the annual sales, ya Kubwa na ya Dogo, net income, question 2B of December 2021. See pilot paper, page 19. So net income is on a profit after tax. Number of ordinary shares tuko nazo, earnings per share. Again, we really didn't need to be given the earnings per share. We can get it. You can get it. Market price per share. This time round, wajatupa the market capitalization, wametupa the market price per share. If I want the market capitalization, I can get. So simply take the MPS times the number of shares. Both companies are in the 30% tax bracket, no problem. For 3 marks, Kubwa Limited post-acquisition earnings per share, assuming the two companies settle on an offer price of 20 shillings on a share-for-share exchange. Tuanzie wapi? Lazima tuanzie kwa the level of exchange ratio, sindio? So maximum exchange ratio. Tuna formula. Offer price of predator. We divide by what? So siandike. Andika ndo unaonyesha neighbor. This is the formula. Jina ya formula imepotea. Jina ya formula ni maximum exchange ratio. Sitaki majina. Hii formula ni muhimu. Hizo ni maths. Unakosaje kumark formula ukayaje mark answer? Unaandika answer bila jina. Ni kama kutembea bila kichwa. Formula ni muhimu by the way. Ukiandika formula hata answer ikiwa wrong hautapata 0 kwa hiyo swali. Utapata marks ya formula. Najua hata kupata 1 mark na umekwamia kwa 49. Si una survive? That's the way people pass without knowing. Na ile pepa unafanya ulikuwa unatarajia ikuje na fail, na unaona imekuja na pass because of those small things that matter. Naambia wakula hiyo sijui nini ilifanyika miujiza. Sasa maandika formula alafu akarelax akisikia story yangu. Mwambie offer price ni ngapi? They have settled on how much? 20. Na MPS ya Predator ni ngapi? Sasa upate the exchange ratio. 0.67. So the offer price of the Predator, which is 20, and the market price per share of the Predator is 30. You're saying 0.67. What is the interpretation? For every one existing share of the target firm, the Predator is offering 0.67 new shares. So they wanted us to get the combined earnings per share, the post-acquisition earnings per share. How do we get the combined earnings per share? So the combined profit after tax, so combined EPS becomes the combined earnings, PAT, which is okay. Combined earnings divided by what? Combined number of shares. So do we have the combined earnings? Kubwa earnings zake ni ngapi? Kwa hiyo si earnings, hiyo ni sales. Funga ni bar 40, si ndio? Alafu ya ndogo ni ngapi? So combined earnings becomes what? 45 million. Then do we have combined number of shares? The Predators tabaki intact. Ambazo ni ngapi? 10. Plus 0.67 for how many shares? For 1 share, ndio. Out of how many shares in total? 2.5 million. So what is the combined number of shares? 11.67. Yes. So therefore, combined EPS 45 divided by 11.67, I think 3.86. That gives us the 3 marks. We check the other 3 marks, part 2. Kubwa Limited's post-acquisition earnings per share, assuming that Dogo Limited shareholders accept 10% debenture, the par value is 1,000 for every 50 ordinary shares held. Also, in this case, the form of consideration, we are giving out the debentures. interpretation is key. If we give out ordinary shares, number of shares itaongezeka. If we give out debentures, interest itaongezeka. Sindio? Now in part 2, we are giving out some new debentures, right? So therefore, we look at the combined earnings. The combined earnings. Tuko na 40 plus what? 40 plus 5, that is 45 million. But that is not all. We know that we are giving out debentures. When you give out debentures, interest is the consequence. The interest in affect our income statement. So therefore, it shall come unless the after tax interest. Interest is a tax allowable expense. Lazima ikuwe na tax effect. Na after tax interest ni ngumu pia kupata. How many debentures are we offering? One debenture for how many ordinary shares? So tuanze na kutafuta the number of debentures. We are having one debenture for every 50 shares. Right? Out of how many shares in total? The 2.5 million shares. Neighbor amepotea. Pende through not required number 2. Kubwa Limited's post-acquisition earnings per share, assuming Dogo Limited shareholders accept 10% debenture, the power value is 1,000. So we are offering one debenture for every shares ngapi ambazo wako nazo? 50 shares. So the first working is to know how many debentures will be offered. Sasa, how many debentures will be offered? We are offering one. If one debenture equals to 50 shares, how many debentures shall we get out of the 2.5 million shares? 50,000 debentures. No. What is the par value? The par value is 1,000. So that will give us the value of the debentures. Now, what is the interest rate per debenture? %. So what is the value of the debentures first of all? 50 million. So the debentures are valued at 50 million. That will be the value of the debentures. Is that okay? So can we get our after-tax interest? Which will be 10% of 50 million adjusted for what? Adjusted for tax. Mambo imechemka. How much? 3.5. So here tuna less hapa. So how much is our combined earnings? 45 minus 3.5. 41 points. That's 41.42. 41.5. That's okay. Ama utaelewa baadaye. What of the combined number of shares? Where?
We are getting which one?
The combined profit after tax. Ile acha turudi nyuma pole pole. Tujaribu kuinterpret hiyo story tumefanya. First of all, the predator alikuwa na profit after tax ya 40. Na target alikuwa na profit after tax ya 5. Before the acquisition, tunazicombine pamoja. Our profit after tax combined will be 45. Sindio? But now there's a catch. We are offering some debentures. We are not offering some ordinary shares. When we offer debentures, the impact is interest will increase. Interest should be affected by tax. Sindio? Interest should be affected by tax. And that's why, yes, to gonna 45. But there's some interest that we are going to pay, which should reduce our profits. Interest reduces the profits. But ile interest ambayo inafai reduce profit yetu ni after tax, because interest has some tax effect. So tunakuja tuna less the interest as an expense that you are also going to pay. So by giving out some debentures instead of ordinary shares, we are also going to pay this interest. So hii working tumefanya hapa, our target was to get how much interest are we going to pay the new shareholder, the new investors that are coming in. You're going to pay them some additional interest after tax of 3.5. So this will also be a cost to us. It's an expense. Na vile ni expense inapunguza profits zetu. So that our net, the net earnings will now be 41.5 instead of 45. Right? Wapi? Onyeka hapa equals. Mimi saizi na T. So equals 3 points. Alafu tuna less. That's okay. Alright, so when you speak, you're speaking for many, isn't it? Speaking for many. Are you together now? So what will be the combined number of shares? The predators takuwa ngapi? 10 million, ndio. As a target? Tampea shares ngapi mpya? Tumempea debentures, hatujampea shares. Hizo 6 mkondo wapi? We are giving out the debentures, right? You're not giving out the shares. That's why debentures zimeongezeka zika affect interest. Shares tutabaki na za predator peke yake. No new shares are being offered, right? Yeah. We are offering new debentures, we are not offering new shares. So can we have the combined EPS? Last time ulisema portfolio isikuje. Sasa tunataka kusema portfolio afadhali ikuje isikuje. Ama wafanye vile wanataka. Washafanya. Washa set. So combined EPS becomes the combined earnings of 41.5 divided by the combined number of shares of 10, which gives us 4.15. To predict gun margins. To predict zote. Na niking'ang'ana ni predict na ning'oe nje. Tiaje sasa. Ndio tukianza mambo ya prediction. Wale waje niongelesha semester mzima wanaanza kuongea. Bado tujaanza. At least tumecheka nyinyi wote. Wale wa online maisikia akiongea. Maliza kwanza swali. Ona this tumeanza kwenda break. Now, the level of combined operating profit, that Kubwa Limited will be indifferent between financing option B1 and B2 above. Hiyo leo tunaifanyaje? Yeah? The option 1, the earnings per share of option 1 equals to earnings per share of option 2. The level of indifference is what they're asking. Remember the EBIT EPS analysis? That's why wameileta kwa matters. Na huko ulikuwa umesema hiyo sitaisoma. Kalamu imeisha. EPS equals to tuanzie kwa EBIT. EBIT minus interest, adjusted for tax. We subtract what? The preference dividends. Fortunately, we don't have the preference dividends. Then we divide by what? The number of the ordinary shares, or the number of shares. So EBIT nauliza one. So we need to get interest, preference dividends kama tuko nazo, the number of shares under the option 1 and option 2. So I can talk about option 1, then we have option 2. So let's start by getting interest. Interest. Under required number 1, is there any interest that we have? Currently tuko na debt. Currently Kubwa Limited hana debt. Sindio? Na tuki acquire ndogo using option 1. Option 1 tunawapea shares.
Yes.
So meaning there is no interest that is coming in. There was no interest before. We are giving out shares, we're not giving out the debentures. So hakuna interest hapo, sindio? What of option required number 2? Tuko na interest. Sindio?
Yes.
Tunaweza rudia kufanya. Otherwise, naweza tafuta to 10% of 50. That will be my interest. Sindio? But still hata kwa sababu tunajiamini, we are giving out 1 debenture, so our interest rate is 10% times the number of debentures, 1 debenture for every 50 shares out of 2.5 million shares. And each share has a par value of 1,000. Hiyo ndio hesabu tulifanya hapa. Tukapata 50, 10% of 50 is 5 million. $5 million, sindio? The preference dividends are not there, right? Can we have the combined number of shares? Under option 1, were they 11.67? $11.67 million. And under option 2, how many shares do we have? 10 million. So therefore, EPS of option 1, EBIT is what I'm looking for. Minus interest is not there. We adjust for tax. Dividends is 0, zero. Preference dividends. Divided by how many ordinary shares? 11.67 equals to EPS of option 2, EBIT ndo tunatafuta, interest ni ngapi? 5. Adjusted for tax divided by the number of shares ambazo ni 10. So can we have the EBIT? Naiba amepata EBIT ya ngapi? Ama ni syntax error? Thirty-six. That's 6.25. 34.94. That's 4.994. There is a September 2021 question 5C. Naiba confirm ukipata that 4.94. Kwa sawa, ilikuwa confirmed. Haya, September sasa, question 5C. September 2021. Page 31. Kwa sawa. Ama itakuwa sawa. Itakuwa sawa. So September 2021 question 5. So let's see that Kitunga will comment. Page 31. September 2021 question 5C. Now we are told that Duncan Kipchumba, the director of Wote Limited, met the director of Toa Limited during a conference in Kisumu City. They had some discussion about their two companies. After flying back to Nairobi, Duncan proposed to his board of directors the acquisition of Toa Limited. During his presentation to the board, he stated that as a result of this takeover, we will diversify our operations and earnings per share will rise to 13%, bringing great benefits to our shareholders. No bid has yet been made, and Wote Limited currently owns 2% of Toa Limited. A bid would be based on an exchange of shares between the two companies, which would be 1 Wote Limited share for every 6 Toa Limited shares. So the exchange ratio is 1:6. 1 new share for every 6. Become 1/6. So I shall prepare for the exchange ratio. We are giving out 1 new share for every 6 existing shares of Toa Limited. What is single predator? Is a director of Wote Limited, and he wants the shareholders of Wote Limited to acquire the Toa. And what is the mode of consideration, the form of consideration? We are giving them 1 share for every 6 shares of theirs. Financial data for the two companies include the following: turnover, profit before tax, profit attributable to ordinary shareholders. Then we have the dividend payable, issued ordinary share capital, market price per share, and the par value per share. Kama tuko na par value per share and we have the issued ordinary share capital, can you get the number of shares? Is it possible to get the number of shares? How many shares does Wote have? Is your neighbor saying 40? Ukiona unaonyesha neighbor ndio hii amefanya hivi. Sasa shida ni kama neighbor ako mbali. Unageuka, kuna mwenye hapo nyuma. Are we saying 40 million?
Yes.
For Wote? And for Toa, are we saying 150? Neighbor anasema anaona 15, si 150. Yes. Kwa unaona 10. 10 ni wapi sasa? 10 iko kwa profit before tax. Issued shares ni ngapi? 20 million C shares. 20 million divided by the 0.5, which is the par value. 20 million were in shillings. Shares cannot be in shillings. Shillings is the value, right? Now for 4 marks, they want us to get the pre-merger price and price to earnings ratio for both companies. The pre-merger. PE ratio. So price earnings ratio equals to market price per share over earnings per. Wanataka for each company. So to the par value iko hapo chini kabisa. The 0.5, ndio. So tuko hapa na Wote na tuko na Toa. Water Limited and Tower Limited. So you need to get the MPS. We have the MPS of water,
Yes.
3 point what?
Two.
3.2. And do you have the MPS of Tower?
Yes.
0.45.
5.4.
So MPS hatuna shida nayo. Can we get the EPS? Kama tuko nayo? We can get the EPS. Ndio. EPS equals to profit after tax and preference dividends, right? Divided by what? Number of shares. By the profit after tax is sawa na kusema profit attributable to ordinary shareholders. Kwa sawa? So part tuko nayo. Ya wote ni ngapi? 7.8 million. Na ya Tower ni ngapi?
6.5.
6.5 million. Ndio. What of the number of shares? Ili tupate 40 na ibaliuliza 20 million divided by 0.5, which is 40 million. Na hii side ingine 15 million divided by what? 0.1, which is 150 million. So can we have our EPS? 7.8 divided by what? Is it divided by 40? Na hiyo side ingine 6.5 divided by what? Divided by 150. So EPS ya wote? Zero point 185 195 na ya Tower 0.043. Can we have the PE ratio? The NPS of 3.2 divided by the EPS of 0.195. Sixteen point 16.41. Hii inakuanga times. Na hii side ingine 0.45 divided by 0.043. 10.47. Then they want us to get the post-merger EPS. Can we have the combined EPS? Combined EPS equals to formula yetu ni gani? Combined earnings divided by what? Combined number of shares. Ndio. We have our combined earnings. ya wote ni ngapi? Ni kama tuisha beat. Ile vitu tunafanyanga wakati umebeat. Chungana nazo sana. 7.8 for wote and Toa is how much?
6.7.
6.5. Earnings ni part, profit attributable to ordinary shareholders. So what is our combined earnings? 14.3. Now, are we giving out ordinary shares or we are giving out debentures? We are giving out ordinary shares. So earnings that was never behavior. Ordinary shares will increase the shares. Shares have nothing to do with our earnings, right? Do we have combined number of shares? Number of shares wote ni ngapi? Eba nakumbuka 40 penye aliandika. Be careful by the, if you are sitting close to somebody, this is the time that you really matter. It's the time to give hope. Usiuze uoga, uza hope. Unauzia uoga. Give up. Na uoga, siuzi uoga. Mimi nimeuza uoga kweli? Sawa, msiogope. You've let me sell hope. You've done these exams before. It's not the first time, right? It's not the first time. Na la saizi mnajilipia school fees. Kama that is the worst. Hakuna. Wakati unajilipia school fees, kwani kuna mtu atakuuliza umeanguka kwa nini? Itakuuma. Lakini wacha pressure, kwa sababu uko na pressure utaanguka. Tell mate. Trust me. When you are under, okay, people are different. The people who are very active when under pressure, and they really absorb. That is you. Okay, if you are like me, when I'm under pressure, I do very little. If you are like me, but if you are not like me, that's okay. Continue with the pressure. But if you are like me, punguza pressure, relax, soma. Ndio. Kwani hizi vitu tunafanya zote zitakuja kwa mtihani? Kazi hizi kuja zote. Ndio. Kazi hizi kuja zote pitia tu. Without, by the way, me, if you are, let me repeat, if you are like me, usikuwe na pressure, soma tu. And the prediction that you are looking for, before I give any prediction, kindly, let me just give a piece of advice. Naona vitabu zetu mingi sijafika katikati, zingine zimefika kidogo. Seriously, who is using a new book? Yake hajafika katikati. Yako iko almost haitaisha. Yake tatu pages. My point is this. Concentrate on what we do in class. It's enough. Najua kuna watu ile umefanya na handwriting yako yenyewe hujaishika, umeanza kutafuta sijui revision kit gani. Umeanza kutafuta maswali za 201. Unaanza na kujikumbusha zile zenye umefanya, zenye umeandika na handwriting yako. What is easy? Is it easy to read your own handwriting? Ile umeandika na mkono wako?
Yeah.
I think it is, right? So go through your handwriting. Your handwriting will take very little time to prepare for this exam. But ukianza kutafuta maswali zingine na revision kits inakaa imeandikwa sijui na nani. Some of those revision kits have wrong answers. Utaanza kutafuta vile wrong answer ilipatikana, ikuwestie the whole day. And you're wasting time. And time is very precious, right? So kindly, let us just believe in what we've done in class. It's more than enough. It's more than enough. If you chose your employer very well, na atakupa some time to read. Hiyo time yenye atakupa kusoma, soma kwa kutumia notes za exercise book yako. If you chose your employer badly, the little time that you'll have to prepare for this exam, kindly use that little time by going through our exercise book. Usitafute swali mgeni. Usitafute swali mgeni, because the topics that we've done them exhaustively. Na zile videos tulisema upitie kindly, and know from next week utaanza kuzitafuta penye ziko. Hatujazidelete, bado ziko tu pale pale, tumekungoja. 40 million plus 150 ni uongo. We are giving out one share for every how many? For every 6. Out of how many shares that they have? 150 million. So what is the combined number of shares? In year 65. Mongeza 40? 65 million shares. Can we have the combined EPS? That is 14.3 divided by 65. You're saying 0.22. 0.22. Then for another 2 marks, they want us to explain whether you agree, Duncan Kipchumba, when he says that the takeover would bring great benefits to ordinary shareholders. Support your answer with relevant calculations. Did they have to tell us that? So, Duncan alisema kuwa, when we acquire this new company, paragraph 2, during his presentation, he stated that as a result of this takeover, we will diversify our operations and earnings per share will rise by 13%, bringing great benefits to our shareholders. So let us we have the new earnings per share, 0.22. So we have the pre-merger earnings per share of Wote. Before acquisition, what was the earnings per share? Tulikuwa tumeipata, si ndio? 0.195. Can we confirm the percentage increase in earnings per share? New minus old over what? Maformula mmesahau. The new earnings per share is 0.22. The old was 0.195. Divide by 0.195 times 100. It increases by what percent? What percent? 12.8. So can we just put there 13%?
Yes.
Where is it? Before anunue hiyo kampuni, earnings per share yao ilikuwa hii. Baada ya kununua, earnings per share imekuja. So you're confirming argument ya Duncan. Ambapo alisema in paragraph 2 kwa kununua hiyo kampuni, earnings per share itaongezeka na 13%. In paragraph 2. So you can just make a statement by confirming this, that acquiring Toa Limited will increase the earnings per share. Acquiring Toa Limited will increase the earnings per share of Water Limited. Metosha hivyo tu. Kwa unapenda English mingi unasema as indicated by Duncan. But tuachana nayo. Twende part 4. The post-acquisition price of a share of Water Limited, assuming the bid is successful for 3 months. Post-acquisition market price per share. Combined MPS equals to combined PE ratio times what? Times combined earnings per share. Combined earnings per share rate on 0.22. Then to get the combined PE ratio, this time round we're just fair. Now, anytime you're looking for the combined PE ratio, it will always be the weighted PE ratio. Remember how to do the weighted? The weighted PE ratio. Tulikuwa na PE ratio ya wote, na tuko na PE ratio ya toa. So we look for the values of water and the values of toa to get the weights. So tuko na, do we have value of water? Market price per share tuko nayo, na tuko na the number of shares. MPS times the number of shares. Tutafuta ya wote, tutafuta pia ya toa. Combine together to get the weights. Weights come from the market values, right? You have the market price per share of water. 3.2 for how many shares? 40 million shares. What is the value of water? 128. What about the value of toa? The price per share 0.45 for how many shares? Which 150 million shares? Be useful to your neighbor. 67.5. What is the total value?
195.5.
Are we able to get the weight of water and the weight of toa? Do you have the PE ratio? PE ratio of water 16.01, and the PE ratio of toa 10.47, ndio 47, right? Ndio imefika mahali pa kuandika, pa kucopy notes. So combined MPS becomes the weight of water, which is 128 divided by 195.5 times the PE ratio of 16.41 plus the weight of toa 67.5 divided by the total of 195.5 times the PE ratio ya ngapi? 10.47. So can we have the combined MPS? Sorry? The value of? The 0.45 times 150. 65 gani, 65 gani. Here you go combined. Yeah. The combined number of shares is the 65. That's That is after the acquisition. The PE ratio was before.
Combines yes. Sasa swali pale mbona tulitumia mali?
Because the 150, you know, the PE ratio that you are combining is the PE ratio based on its original number of shares, its original value before the merger. After the merger, PE ratio ya toa haibaki the 10.47.
But it's okay. Combine the direction of rating. But it's really
Bora tusitumie the combined EPS. Combined EPS. Hii hata yenye tuko nayo ni combined PE ratio, si MPS. Bado tujamaliza swali. Hiyo ni combined PE ratio kaini.
So thinking it's reasonable to
now we have the combined PE ratio times the combined earnings per share. The combined PE ratio is the weighted PE ratio. The weighted PE ratio is the PE ratio pre the acquisition, the PE ratio of water times the weight of water plus the PE ratio of TOA times the weight of TOA. Tukitumia hii, the 65 million, they are not shares of TOA. The 65 million are shares of Water Limited. Because after the acquisition, TOA Limited will not be there. So we are bringing in TOA Limited. So even the 65 million that we are bringing in, they are not shares of TOA Limited. They are shares of Water Limited that we are giving to shareholders of TOA Limited. Wakati tunawaacquire. So the combined PE ratio, we get it from the original values before the acquisition. PE ratio of water times the weight of water. Weights we get them from the values. That's how. Then we have the PE ratio of TOA times the weight of TOA. The weights we get them from the values. The price of one share before the acquisition was 3.2. And the number of shares were 40. That is for water. To help us get what? The market value of water. Sasa, the market value of TOA before acquisition, each share was going at 0.45. You cannot, by there again, you cannot take the price of a share of 0.45, then you multiply by the number of new shares. You'll be getting it wrong. You compare, the price of 0.45 is for the how many shares? The 150 million shares that TOA Limited had. After the acquisition, TOA Limited does not exist. After the acquisition, we only have one company, which is Water Limited. That's how. So whatever we've been doing here, this one will help us to get the weight. The weight of water, 128 divided by 195.5. The weight of TOA, 67.5 divided by 195.5. So hiyo inasaidia kupata the weight. Times the PE ratio. So this one will be the weight of water times the PE ratio of water. Plus weight of TOA times the PE ratio of TOA. This one will help us get the combined PE ratio. That's how. So what is up? Now, combined is after. When we bring them together now, when we bring water and TOA together, what is their combined PE ratio? 14.35. 36. Sasa tuweke gani? Tumeweka 5. Weka 6, hiyo umepata. Na si already tuko na combined earnings per share 0.22. So therefore, combined MPS becomes the combined PE ratio of 14.35 times the combined earnings per share of 0.22. 3.16. Is this one a bad topic? It's a very bad topic. It's a prayer that was later. So there are many questions you can look at. Can I give you one or two? But I should need. The first step towards trying is to look at it. So hiyo sitting inapata iko na question 4B. Neba karibu anauliza sitting inapata ni gani? Chamwambia tuuliza tunajibu. May 2021 question 4B. November 2019, question 5B. November 2019, question 5B. May 2019, question 5B. So kindly try them out so that on Thursday we talk about international finance as we think of what we've dreamt that will come.